Good afternoon. It's Lee Cassidy from Tactile Technology, and we're back into the throes of in the hot seat. We've had a bit of a gap, but we've got loads of people lined up over the next few weeks. And the first one in our new set is with Richard Kerry of Bell Lax, a solicitors company. So let's get Richard in with us. How are you doing, Richard?
I'm doing well, Lee. Thanks. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. So we always like to start at the very beginning. I remember a famous musical started that way. So if you could tell us a bit about your, beginnings. So where you were brought up, your parents, what they did for a living, schooling, and maybe some of the things you really enjoyed at school, and we'll move on from there.
Well, I was born in London, but grew up in Essex. Went to school just outside Southend, England's newest city. Went to school there called Westcliff High School. School, I enjoyed history, politics, and English, which were my three A-level subjects. And then I went on to university here in Birmingham, where I pretty much lived on and off ever since. Numerous attempts to try and get away, but never quite. The lure of the Brummies kept bringing me back. I spent a couple of years working in London when I was doing my articles, now known as being a trainee solicitor. But then I came back to Birmingham and worked there for a number of years. Had a brief spell in Manchester with the same firm, but pretty much on and off always in Birmingham.
So had you planned to become a solicitor originally while you were at school, or did it just happen? Or was there like family influence?
No, not really. No history of lawyers in the family. I think it was, as much as anything, I enjoyed the subjects I did for A-level at school, but none of them I wanted to take any further and do at university. And I think partly from the history and the politics, there was always a bit of law and government within those subjects, obviously. And I just fancied doing law at university, not initially with the idea or the ambition of becoming a solicitor. I did spend, after I graduated, a year as a management trainee with Commercial Union, but they were clearly pushing me towards the claims side of things because there's a lot of law involved there. But I decided that no, I did want to become a solicitor, so I went on to law school and then qualified 31 years ago. Now it is seems to have flown by.
It's amazing how it does fly by, doesn't it? It shoots by.
Yeah, absolutely.
So coming back to school in that, was there any particular areas you really enjoyed of your school life? Was it sporting? Was it science? Was it any areas particularly?
Well, as I say, but I didn't mind science, but it wasn't really my strongest area. I enjoyed, as I say, history, English. As a career that involves so much reading now, where the mountain of documents we have on a case that need to be read through, it's a good thing, I suppose. And an interesting current affairs. I think that's something quite often people who say to me, "I'm thinking of becoming a lawyer. What should I do?" And I say, well, apart from anything, be interested in current affairs. The law affects current affairs all the time. I mean, politics is about government making new laws, how the world works, and there's history is a part of how the world works. So, how did we get to where we are now? So those are the things that I liked at school, and I think sort of led me to want to do law as a degree at university, and then I suppose the natural progression was on to become a solicitor.
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk about what's happening in politics and news and things, because we all used to read newspapers, and then maybe broadsheets if you wanted a higher level view of it. The Telegraph, the Times, places like that. When there were broadsheets all the time, that's changed recently. But a lot of people now, they're actually taking a lot of their news from social media, which can be influenced by people quite heavily. So sometimes what they're actually absorbing, is not real. It's quite interesting, isn't it?
No, absolutely. I mean, I can't remember the last time I bought, let alone read a newspaper. I would get most of my news. I wake up every day to Radio 4's Today programme, listen to a lot of Radio 4. I would get most of my news either from the BBC website or from the BBC News. As you say, social media is highly unreliable, particularly if you're just listening to people's views. It's just, I'm sure a lot of it is accurate, but I wouldn't trust it.
No. No.
As you say,
Anyway, so going back to, you're going to go to university, you're down in, the southeast of England. Why Birmingham?
I'll be brutally honest with you. It was the only university that made me an offer. Initially, I quite fancied Exeter. I quite fancied Exeter was my first choice. Birmingham was my second choice. They made me an offer. I got the grades, and that's how it is. Funny thing is, they made me the offer without ever asking for an interview. So the first time I had ever been to Birmingham was the day I came to university, the day I came up for freshers, and that was it. And I arrived in sunny Edgbaston, where the university campus is. And I thought, this is lovely. It's in Birmingham. It's all very, very nice, big sort of houses around the Edgbaston area. But soon learned it's not all like that.
No, definitely not. So where did you stay? Did you stay on the university campus originally?
I did in the first year. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Stayed in halls of residence in the first year. Second year, I had a fantastic, huge house out in Sturchley, quite a decent distance from the university. It was quite a long cycle ride in every day. And then I think I did what the vast majority of Birmingham University students want to do, which was a little terraced house in Selly Oak in my final year. Yeah, so that was nice and close to the university each day.
Yeah, Selly Oak's full of students, isn't it? All through.
Yes, it really is. I think if you've been to Birmingham University and not lived at least 1 year in Selly Oak, you haven't really had the full experience.
Yeah, and you gained the Balti Triangle experience as well, did you? Then of Birmingham.
Oh, absolutely. And as I say, as somebody who first came to Birmingham September 1986, so here I am, whatever that is, 38 years later. Yes, still enjoying the Balti life.
Yeah. So when you go and do a degree in law, so how broad is it? So does it cover a lot of different areas, or the different courses depending on what you're looking for?
It is, because to become a solicitor, you have to get what's known as a qualifying law degree, which requires you to have studied quite a broad range of areas of law, many of which I don't use at all now. For instance, criminal. I spent a year learning all about the criminal law. I've never dealt with any criminal law. I've never been arrested either, so it's not something that I've needed. I had to learn all about the history of law, how the political system works, how the government passes legislation, how the courts make law with case law, land law. That was an area that I never really got my head around massively. The law of tort, which deals with social obligations. Back in those days, we still had to study European law, because obviously we were still members of the European Union in those days, and how European legislation affects what goes on in the UK, along with contract law and various optional subjects. I studied insurance law, which perhaps explains why I had a brief spell working for Commercial Union, and a lot of the cases I deal with now, the defendants we're bringing claims against are insurance backed. The vast majority, by which I mean probably 99.9% of personal injury claims, the defendant is insurance backed, but whether that's a road traffic accident claim or an accident at work. And that's why the legislation passes to make those areas compulsory. So yes, the degree was very broad. The area of work I do now, it involves quite a lot, actually. It's got a broad spectrum, because almost anything can end up in a dispute, and that's the areas of law we specialize in. So it can be a dispute involving a property, somebody's estate, a deceased relative who's died, somebody contesting a will, contractual disputes between businesses. It's very broad, which I really enjoy.
Yeah, and say from a layman's perspective, the only time we normally use lawyers, solicitors, is we're buying a house, or we're selling a house, or doing both, or we get divorced, which I've been through multiple. Divorce only the once, but buying and selling the house.
Buying and selling houses. Those are the two main. The other one, of course, is making a will, which I would recommend everybody does. So that, as you say, for the vast bulk of individuals, it's buying and selling a house, making a will, and occasionally, for whatever percentage of people it is getting divorced. But once you come into the field of business, of course, there's huge amounts of law and regulations. So if you're taking a business, whether you're going into a partnership or a company, you need to have some sort of, you should, if you're sensible, have some kind of agreement, whether it's a partnership agreement or a shareholders agreement. If you're employing staff, you need contracts of employment. If you're leasing equipment for your business, there's going to be contracts involved there.
Yeah.
And then the disputes arise, because unfortunately that's what happens. Human nature, people fall out. And as I say, a lot of my clients that I deal with, because I do a lot of commercial disputes as a firm, because all our clients are involved in a dispute one way or another. We do act for an awful lot of individuals. Obviously, all our divorce clients are individuals. They may have their own business, but it's in their individual capacity we're acting for them. And again,
Yeah.
all our personal injury and medical negligence clients, they're all individuals who've suffered injury or an accident from the medical profession. So I quite like the fact that we have that broad range, that I can act for Mrs. Smith, but I can also act for Smith Limited.
Yeah. So coming back to, well, again, from my perspective, it's a very stressful time when you're going through the buying or selling of a property, especially when you can't get everything aligned on the right day, and it keeps, people drop out. It's massively stressful. Divorce, another very stressful period
Yes,
for a lot of
absolutely.
people when they go through it. What's it like from your perspective, as a solicitor dealing with people? Because you must have some empathy with the individuals you're dealing with, and you can see how upset they're getting with the situations as well.
Absolutely. We get all the time. We get lots of clients who get emotional in one way or another, whether they're crying or they're cross, they're angry, they're not happy with the situation they find themselves in. But the reality is that that's nearly all our clients. That old advert for Yellow Pages, where they used to say, we're not just here for the nasty things in life. Unfortunately, we are just here for the nasty things in life. It's people come to us because something has gone wrong, whether it's in their marriage, whether they've been injured, whether they've got a dispute with their brother or sister over a parent's will, whether a supplier of goods has supplied them with something that's gone wrong, or one of their customers is complaining. All our clients are unhappy and distressed in one way or another. And as I say, a lot of them apologize. They say, oh, I'm so sorry to get upset. And I said, we have to say, no, that's fine. All our clients are like that. Some deal with it better than others.
Yeah.
But yes, you have to show a degree of empathy. Absolutely. I think particularly for divorce clients and personal injury clients, it's a little easier for me in commercial disputes, because I think people who've been in business a while know that it's par for the course. It's just part of being in business. Issues will come about. But certainly for individual clients for whom disputes aren't a regular occurrence, it's a question of, you have to put a metaphorical arm around their shoulder to some extent, but you're not there to be their best friend. You're there to get them through that problem and explain to them that this is the process, this is what you're going to need to go through, but at the same time not be too cold and clinical about it.
Okay, so you did your training to be on legal. You went on to do your becoming a solicitor, going through that process. How was that experience for you? Is it hard work, long hours? How did it work?
University was, as I think university is for a lot of people, certainly was for a lot of people in the 1980s when I was there. Law school, which is the postgraduate course that you need to go and do to become a solicitor, I have to say, academically, that was the hardest I'd ever worked, because it was so clear to me at that stage. What age would I have been? 22, 23, realizing that if this was the career I wanted to go into, I had to pass that. I had to become, just to get a job as a trainee solicitor, as an art school clerk. The law is tough, like a lot of jobs. It requires a degree of of application and memory, attention to detail. But that, I think, is true in a lot of jobs. If you're working as a healthcare professional, an engineer, a builder, making sure that, if it says 2.7 millimeters, it's 2.7 millimeters, not
Yeah.
2.8 or 2.6, and it's the same for lawyers.
So it's the detail
Details right,
in the
yeah,
contract
details
or
always
whatever's happened is really
yeah.
important. Yeah, because not everybody's very detail orientated, are they? They don't spend that time to drill down to the accuracy of things. So it is quite important, the legal profession, to be able to see that detail.
Oh, absolutely. As I say, a lot of people will come to us. They've had a dispute, and there will have been a contract drawn up, often between them as individuals, without any legal input, and the unexpected has happened, and the contract doesn't provide for it, or there is a dispute over the wording, and as a result, it's looking at those details, and very often, one of my rather trite phrases is that generally the law is straightforward. It's the evidence that's difficult, and it's finding the details, often in an exchange of emails or a letter that somebody's written, or the date of an invoice, something like that, that actually really shows the truth of the situation, and which party is most likely to win if the case goes to trial. That a case many years ago where I never fully trusted our client, and we then found an email that he'd sent a day or two after the incident that was at the centre of the dispute, and we just had to say to him, but if everything occurred as you say it did, why did you send this email the day after, which rather contradicts everything you told me? And he'd obviously forgotten he was lying, and we had to get rid of him as a client, because you can't put forward a case to be fundamentally untrue. But it was spotting the detail in the terms of the date of that email. If everything occurred as you've just told me, or we've been running your case, you would have never have sent that email. So details, yeah, always important.
Oh, okay. So you went through and you worked for other people as a solicitor. What was the big change when you effectively took on, your own business? I think it was about 30 years ago. You went into Bell Lax and actually became part of the business. How different was that from your perspective?
I mean, when I started my career, when I qualified, I spent 10, 11 years doing almost exclusively defendant professional negligence work. So all the clients I worked for were the insurers of accountants, solicitors, surveyors, architects, insurance brokers. So I had always had two masters there, the insurance company and their insured. And as I say, I did that for 10 or 11 years. And I just found it a little bit samey. Being the defendant all the time is not the greatest fun. Nearly always you were losing, or at least having to settle cases. So early part of this century, I decided to branch out and do something more interesting, and I got a job where I was involved in much broader work, all the areas of work that I still personally do now. And I worked for a firm, and then, when would it have been? Nearly, 12 years ago, I was headhunted by Heather Bell and Peter Lax, who are the founders of Bell Lax, and they took me on board as a partner here. And a year or two later, they took me into a meeting, which I have to say they gave me no warning about. And my initial thought was, "Oh, blimey, what have I done wrong? What am I in trouble for?" And they said, "We've come to the decision that we'd like to move on and retire." And Suzanne Holder, my business partner, who had been their long-term finance director, they said to Suzanne and I, "Would you like to take the business on?" And that would have been late 2014. And Suzanne and I took over and have been running the business now since the 1st of June 2015. So just over 9 years.
So how did you feel because you were working with the same business? So what was the change when you actually became the owner? Was it how you felt about it? Was anything else? How did it change?
I think the first the main feeling I had was one of excitement. The actual feeling that after having been a solicitor for over 20 years, the opportunity to then run a business and to actually think that every penny that we make becomes important, all the costs, the staffing, all those elements was a new challenge, something I was really excited about, and still am, still really enjoy. I still enjoy doing work for clients, working on cases, going to court as and when I do. But running a business it's a challenge, I think, as everybody says, as I'm sure you'll accept yourself, Lee.
Yeah,
But it's great. No, I've really enjoyed it. There was some skills I had to learn, some skills I already had but didn't realise I had. There were some things I found quite easy, other things not so easy. It certainly helped having a business partner who is finance orientated. So um, we rarely, if ever, fall out, because if it's a legal issue, I deal with it. If it's a finance issue, Suzanne deals with it. I think the longest disagreement we ever had lasted 10 minutes, and then one of us realized that we just misunderstood what the other one was saying.
yeah,
So it is a challenge, and there are obviously the good bits when you make good money, the bits when you do worry about where the next piece of work is coming from, how you're going to get paid, clients who owe you money. I think that's the same for all business owners, isn't it? Whether you're whether you're going to make a big profit this month, or whether you're going to be reliant on your overdraft. It's exciting always, at least.
yeah, definitely. So tell us about the kind of things, any like stories of what's happened that's come along. So maybe one in, medical negligence, and, let's anonymize these things,
Oh,
something,
absolutely.
around the commercial dispute side of things. Just give us a picture of the kind of things that you do on a day-to-day basis, and the kind of results that you get for your clients.
um, Divorce work is not really very exciting. I mean, it often comes with a slightly soap opera esque background when the client tells you the awful things that their husband or wife has done, and you have to remember to be professional about that. But I don't generally think that divorce cases stand out too much from a legal perspective. As I say, that the soap opera drama of human relations is always there. Um, in terms of personal injury and medical negligence cases, one thing that we do pride ourselves on here is that there's no such thing as a claim that's too big for us. Lots of firms deal with personal injury cases, but the bulk of those will be what's referred to as soft tissue injuries, bruising, whiplash claims, a soft tissue
Yeah,
injury. And that's not to say that they're not painful and people lose time from work, but even the sort of injuries where you slip on some spilt milk in a supermarket and break your arm, ultimately, those sorts of clients, those cases, the individual's going to get better. It's not going to have an eternal, long lasting impact on their life. Whereas we do specialize in much more, in much bigger cases. The biggest case we've ever had, obviously completely on a no names basis, was a chap in his mid-20s returning from, I think he was returning from a Christmas party, and he just got hit by a taxi that was speeding, and suffered some properly life-altering injuries. His career was going quite well. As a result of the injuries, he was never going to be able to work, certainly not in the job he had. He resulted in significant mobility issues. He could walk, but not very far. He needed a walking frame or a wheelchair. As a result, he couldn't live in a house with stairs. The injuries to his head caused some quite nasty personality changes. So a lot of the time he was absolutely lovely, pleasant guy, very funny, very amusing, knew everything, and then he would just get very angry, a lot of swearing, and then he'd phone us up the next day and say, I'm really sorry, was I the was I the Mr. Hyde yesterday? And then he could be Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And that was a long case, and it took us a long time to reach a solution to that. But pleased to say the client went away with £9 million because his life was never going to be the same. He was 25. It didn't have the accident didn't have a significant impact on his life expectancy. But as I say, he was never going to
It
work
would change
again.
his life, though, wouldn't it,
Oh,
dramatically?
absolutely. He needed, regular care. His house had to be adapted. So yeah, it was a very big case, but it shows the level and the complexity of cases we can deal with. We're not just here, as I say, for whiplash claims. In terms of commercial disputes, there was a case that a colleague and I dealt with that we wrapped up just before Christmas last year, actually, where we acted for a very unfortunate company, been in business a long time, never had any problems, lots of very satisfied customers, and it's a slightly complex story, but a product that they produced, a third party, they subcontracted part of the work to a third party, and it was this third party that did something wrong. And when they provided the components that they'd manufactured, there was a problem with that, as I say, wasn't of their making. It was caused by the third party, and without wishing to get too involved in the legal complexities, basically there was a carcinogenic material on these components, but unfortunately they couldn't pass the claim on to that third party subcontractor as would normally be the way, and the claim against them was for the best part of £1 million, and there was no way this business was ever going to be able to afford that. They were uninsured. I don't think the business had ever turned over much more than £500,000. It certainly didn't have £1 million to just settle this dispute. But we were very, very pleased that we were able, through getting some excellent expert analysis of this carcinogenic material, which demonstrated that it was nowhere near as bad as the claimants were suggesting, that the only way it was going to cause cancer would have been for somebody to effectively just stand over it with an electric sander and breathing it in for long periods of time, which was obviously was never going to happen. And we demonstrated also that it wasn't actually in breach of the law which the claimants were making out, and it was complicated by the fact that at the time all this happened, we were still in the EU, so EU regulations applied. So by the instruction of some excellent, I say some excellent experts, we got in touch with at least a dozen experts before we found one who was able to comment on both the toxicity of this substance and the legality of it. And in the end, we persuaded the claimant to abandon their case, and we have a delighted client who didn't end up losing his business that he'd run for 35 years. And didn't have to pay anything to the claimant. So that was a good feeling, because he was a thoroughly nice man, him and his wife who ran this company, lovely couple. And when you get a result like that, that he suddenly realized that he'd be able to retire in a couple of years, which he intended, and be able to sell his business and not almost have the business go into liquidation.
And why couldn't he, pass that on to the third party that either sourced the product that went into it?
The source of his problem was
contractually, or
it was mainly contractual. The problem was that he and his customer had traded on his customer's terms of business, which required him to take on quite a number of onerous situations if something went wrong, as it did. The problem was he didn't have any terms of business himself. He just traded on a handshake basis with the subcontractor, which meant the indemnity that he was required to give to his customer, the subcontractor wasn't, combined with the fact that the limitation rules that mean you can only bring a claim for breach of contract for 6 years, that time in terms of the contract between him and the subcontractor had expired, in a way that, because of the terms of business he had, or his customer had, and that he'd signed up to, he couldn't get out of. So he couldn't argue the case is statute barred in the way that his subcontractor could. He did very quickly go off and get his own terms of business drawn up,
Yeah.
and ensure that in future, if he ever subcontracted part of the work out, that he made sure that his subcontractors were bound by the same terms he was. So that was why it was so tragic that he'd done nothing wrong. There was the subcontractor had effectively created the carcinogenic component to the bits that he was manufacturing, and the claimant had rather overstressed about the levels of toxicity of this chemical. So as I say, delighted to get a result like that for somebody who was a thoroughly nice client and a pleasure to work for.
Well, let's just give people a few bits. So first of all, if you want to look up the website, there's the website for anybody who's interested in having a look and contacting Bell Lax. There's also LinkedIn details for Richard if you want to connect with Richard, and even if you've got some questions, I'm sure you'd answer some questions, maybe not on a legal perspective, but just general questions about things if people want to contact you. But also, if you have got a particular case you want to discuss, maybe drop Richard an email.
Absolutely.
There's Richard's email details, and contact him there. So before we finish, is there anything particular you'd want to tell people about your approach at Bell Lax, the kind of things you do that we haven't covered already?
I think our approach at Bell Lax is that we're always more than happy to have a conversation with somebody about what they perceive as a problem or something that might be a problem. Early intervention is critical. We've seen a lot of it in the last week or two. 2 or 3 clients who've come to us having already had court proceedings issued against them and served on them, which means there's a terrible rush to get things sorted out, and as with so many things in life, time is money, and the more work we have to do to try and sort them out and resolve the matters with the court, the more expensive it is. And if they'd come to us earlier, we could have saved them a lot of time and trouble and money. And I think one of the things that sets us apart from a lot of firms is that we are, in our commercial team, certainly all personal injury cases are dealt with on a no-win, no-fee basis, but we're able to act for a lot of our commercial and civil clients on a no-win, no-fee basis, because we're able to say to our clients, look, we trust in our own ability. We know when there's a case and we're confident we can win it for you. And to reflect that, we will only charge you if we are successful. We have some skin in the game. We're prepared to effectively put our money where our mouth is. And not all firms are willing to do that.
Okay. Right, so just tell you, coming up, so I've got no one for next Monday. We've had to reschedule who is up for next Monday, but hopefully we might fill that seat beforehand. But the following Monday, the 23rd, we've got Richard Bissiker, who's going to talk about his business and how he helps organisations with their management and management training. So we're going to have him in a couple of weeks' time. But I always like to finish on a couple of things. One is, what's the best meal you've ever had? Where was it? Why was it? The best meal.
Well, I feel I probably ought to say something that my wife or my daughter, who are both excellent cooks, have made for me, but if I choose one over the other, I'm going to get into trouble. So what I will say is I did have the most fantastic cod and chorizo and pre-lentils at a restaurant I can't remember the name of now, but it's under a railway arch in South London, and it was accompanied by one of the nicest bottles of wine I've ever had. So I'll say that so as not to get into trouble between my wife and my daughter.
Okay, and what's the most adventurous thing you've ever done?
I think other than taking over the business here, the most adventurous thing I've done is possibly I did a charity cycle ride about 10 years ago now, where we cycled coast to coast ride, it's known. So you go from roughly Carlisle to Newcastle over the Pennines, and it was probably the first time I'd ridden a bike in about 10 years as well. And that was
not
hard.
The first ride you want to go on, really, is it?
Yeah, it was hard work. apparently you do it that way. You go from Carlisle to Newcastle because the prevailing winds are generally going west to east. The only problem is the weekend we did it, the prevailing winds were very much the other way. So I do remember on occasions you get to the top of a hill and think, oh, great, there's a nice downhill bit now, only to find the wind so strong in your face, it's having to cycle downhill as well. Yeah, I'd say that was physically, that was the hardest thing to do as a man, if not into, certainly approaching middle age.
Oh, okay. So were you a middle-aged man in lycra though for the day?
I was for that long weekend. Yes, we did it over 3 days. Yes, it was some. I remember saying to somebody when we finished that I was looking forward to getting into sitting in my car on the nice soft seats again, and he said, well, the only problem with that is your backside is no longer the same shape, so it might not feel as comfortable as it did.
Well, thanks ever so much for your time today. It's been great to learn more about
you,
yourself and also your business. If anybody's got any questions, we've not had many any questions so far live, but if you want to put any comments in LinkedIn or wherever you see this video, and we'll answer them in the comments back to you there. But thanks ever so much for joining me today, Richard. If you stay on afterwards, we'll just close it down, then just have a quick catch up afterwards. Thanks ever so much. And like I say, thank you everybody for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.